So they said, look, we're great mountains. Hashem didn't choose them because they were great. He chose Mount Sinai because it was a little bit smaller. Because if you want to learn Torah, you have to make yourself a little bit smaller. So how does Har Maria come into the picture? Har Maria didn't have anything to say. It was very shy. Didn't say anything. Hashem said, Har Maria, you're the mountain that I want, where my Torah will be taught. And therefore Hashem moved Har Maria to Sinai, and the Torah was given on Har HaMoriah, on Mount Moriah, and on Har Sinai, in the place of Har Sinai. How did that happen? Well, I don't know. Hashem can do things like that. That's like when Jews crossed the Red Sea, it says that there was a strong east wind blowing the whole night. How strong was that wind? Was it a gale 3, gale force 3, gale force 5? Can anybody stand in front of a gale force wind at all? And that wind that just floods cities. It doesn't split any seas. This is the wind that split the ocean. It's impossible to understand this pasuk because it's impossible that a wind is so strong to split an ocean, not a river, not a lake, an ocean, that anybody could stand in front of it, let alone donkeys, and older people and children, women and children, or even men. No, you just get blown away. How are we supposed to understand it? Well, Hasidus teaches us that the words that say it was a strong east wind have another meaning. What's the other meaning? It says a strong wind. Well, the word for a wind, now you're familiar with this word, is what's your soul called in Hebrew? Your neshama. Right? But there are levels of the neshama. There's nefesh, right? That's your basic living soul. And then there's ruach. That's your emotional level of the soul, level where you feel things. That's higher than the basic life that all things have. And then there's your neshama, which is unique. And the question is, so when did we get, if everybody has a nefesh, and everybody does have a nefesh, is there such a thing as a Jewish nefesh, a more special nefesh than a non-Jewish nefesh? I would think so. I would think so. But everybody has some kind of level of a nefesh, because that's your life, where you feel things, and people, all kinds of people have emotions, good emotions, hopefully. It says in the Tanya, in the first parak, that the nefesh of a Jew is naturally kind. That's our nature. It's not an achievement. A horse knows how to run. Jewish people are kind. It's just the way we are. So if a person is very kind, he shouldn't think he's a righteous person. So that's his nature. And they are merciful. They're forgiving. That's what we are. And we are modest. Peer pressure makes us behave immodestly because we think it'll make us popular. But it's not natural. A little child who doesn't know the difference between young and old runs around naked in the street. And the mother runs after him, hey, come back, put your clothes on. Once the child grows up a little bit, they don't run around naked in the street anymore. They're shy. People are shy. And that's part of the nature of the Jewish nefesh from Klippas Noga. So we have nefesh, ruach. Ruach means a spirit. Right? So it says, a strong ruach was blowing from the east. And the word east is either mizrach, but there's another word for the east, which is kedem, like kedem wines, yeah? Kedem means the front. So it's a ruach kadim. What does that mean, the ruach kadim? It means a spirit from kadmeni shel olam, from that which is first in the whole universe. What's that? That's Hashem. So it was a strong wind, a strong spirit, a godly spirit from the highest level of God before all other levels. That's what was blown. That's what was before that. The oceans fled. When that was revealed, the oceans fled. And when that was revealed, the ocean returned to dry land for the Jewish people because they deserved that. And the Egyptians, they got a good strong wind, which became a tsunami and drowned them all. How could the same thing happen at the same time? How can you understand that? Was it a strong wind or was it a revelation of God? For the Jewish people, it was like being in the Garden of Eden. There was music, the birds were singing, trees were growing, it wasn't damp, it wasn't hilly, it wasn't muddy. And there wasn't a traffic jam. How'd they get millions of donkeys through this river in such a short period of time? And there's no traffic jam. You can't even get back from the Catskills on Sunday because of the traffic jams. How they get 93, millions of donkeys, every family, 300,000 families had 90 donkeys, big, huge donkeys. Every one of them. You do the arithmetic, work it out, 300,000 times 90. How many donkeys? And they all came back like this, didn't go across. They went in a semicircle and came back out the same side. And that's why they're afraid the Egyptians were also going to come out, back up the same side and chase them and kill them. So Hashem had to show them their corpses so they wouldn't be afraid anymore, never be afraid anymore. So the question is, how can that Ruach Kadim, that primeval, that's the word for it in English. Primeval means before everything else, right? This primeval spirit was revealed. Hashem revealed this to the Jewish people. And even a handmaid, a servant girl who attached herself to the Jewish people, she saw what the biggest prophets never saw. But she remained, she didn't have the vessels to understand it, to internalize it. So she remained what she was, but she saw it. A revelation of godliness that had never, ever been revealed before. Now, how can you understand this? Let me give you an example of how you can understand it. You'll understand it very easily, I think, I hope. If you're still confused, you'll tell me, Rabbi, I'm still confused. Okay, you ready? Fasten your seatbelts. Abraham, the first Jewish person, he went on Talucha. Did you go on? Anybody know what Talucha is? Talucha is when all the Bacharim and all the rabbis went walking all over New York City to cheer up the Jews in their congregations and teach them something about God. And the Talucha is a march. So they went out and they marched all over. And here the police escorted them. This is itself a sign of the messianic times that we are in. In previous generations, the police were chasing us. They would kill us, kill these people on death marches. They didn't keep up. Here the Jews, the police were actually helping the Jews safely go through dangerous neighborhoods to reach their fellow Jews in their synagogues and to share the happiness of Yom Tov with them. Is wonderful, unbelievable. Who would have believed this in the 1940s, that this was possible? When if a Jew showed his face in the street, he could get beaten up. Just like that. That's Tahalucha. Where did Tahalucha start? Some people think the Rebbe made it up. He didn't make it up. The Baal Shem Tov sent all his best students out to the little villages where the children weren't getting good education. And he sent the biggest scholars, the geniuses, to learn Aleph Beis with the ordinary people who didn't know and never got any instruction, didn't even know how to read. Maybe they knew blessings by heart. And there are a lot of stories about about the Baal Shem Tov's hidden followers, hidden tzaddikim, and the people that they brought under the wings of the Shekhinah and how they grew and developed. And you'll read them in the memoirs. It's fascinating to read. You should all read the Lubavitcher Rebbe's memoirs. It's in two volumes. The third volume, you can even get it somewhere. So he sent his Talmidim out on tahaluchim, on marches, that they should go to these communities. The Mittler Rebbe sent out Hasidim to Ukraine. The Mittler Rebbe did a great thing, you know. Jews were never allowed to own land. The landlords, the aristocrats, would not. There was anti-Semitism. They wouldn't give Jews any land. So Jews couldn't really earn a living, because that's how you earned a living in those days. This is before the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution changed everything economically. And the Mittler Rebbe got on good terms with certain landlords. You know, these landlords had estates of hundreds of thousands of acres, like half of New York State. And the landlords, they were called paritzim. They weren't just, you know, landlords. They were like kings. They were dukes and nobles, and they had armies, and you didn't mess with them. They had power of life and death over the people who lived on their estate in the villages and towns that were all part of their estate, the duchy of such and such a place, Sussex, the duchy of Wessex in England. This was feudal Europe. This was in the feudal system. The ordinary people who lived there were called serfs. Where were we?
He was friends with feudal.
What?
He was friends with the leaders.
Can't hear you.
He was friends with the leaders when he sent people out.
I can't make out the words. What's she saying? What is she saying?
He was friends with the leaders.
What?
The Jew I think we were talking about was friends with the leaders, and he sent them out.
I can't make out what anybody's saying. I don't know why. The sounds just seem to blur.
He was friends with the leaders.
Oh, yeah, the Mittler Rebbe. Yeah, the Mittler Rebbe got a grant that Jewish people were able to go into the places in Ukraine and make settlements. This was a revolution. This was revolutionary. That was so wonderful. The Jewish people were able, these poor people, I mean, they could be holy people, but they had no means of earning a living. I mean, how much can you earn as a shoemaker or a tailor? That's if they had something that they could do that was marketable. So they were able to go and have a farm with maybe a cow. That was a real status symbol if you had a cow, because then you had milk, you have cheese, a few chickens. Here they could grow vegetables. This was wonderful, but there was a big problem. There were no teachers. The children were growing up ignorant. And the Mittler Rebbe would take his biggest Hasidim, who could have been Rabbeim in their own right, and he would send them every year. Hillel Paritcher was one of them from the town of Paritch. Reb Hillel had to go every year for like 4 or 5 months from around the villages in Ukraine, teaching the children how to read. And the Rebbe demanded this of him, and demanded that when someone would come to the Rebbe to get a blessing, on his way home, he had to take a different route each time and stop in every village he came to and say over teachings from the Rebbe in that place. So that's the source. That's where Ta'alucha comes from. And this was established by the Baal Shem Tov before the Mittler Rebbe. Mittler Rebbe was, the Alter Rebbe was the father of the Mittler Rebbe, and he considered himself the spiritual grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And it goes back It's an ancient tradition. Abraham did the same thing when Abraham left Nimrod and left Ur Kasdim. He went from wherever he went, from place to place, making his way from Baghdad to Syria, and came into the Holy Land and said, this is a good place to live. And Hashem said, it's yours. And from that moment on, it became it's our land. That's our land. That's where it comes from. And wherever Avram went, he was teaching people that there's a God in the world. These idols are nonsense. How can you believe in something that your neighbor made it just last week? And it's going to protect you? If people had expensive idols, they had to keep them inside so they shouldn't get stolen. How can you believe in a God that could get stolen? But that's what people were. People have statues in their homes even today. And when they're in need, they pray to the statue. And Avram had hundreds of followers. And there was a king in those days named Nimrod. Heard of Nimrod? Nimrod was a mighty soldier, a mighty warrior. But he was a warrior against God. He convinced the people of the world to build a tower that would be up to heaven to prevent God from bringing another flood in the world. They were going to fight against God. So what did God do? He changed their languages. They couldn't understand each other. Since they couldn't understand each other, then they killed each other. And that was the end of the tower. All these stories are written up in the Torah. So then came along Abraham teaching, restoring to people the knowledge that there's a God in the world. So that's where Talucha comes from. He was going from place to place teaching about God. And he raised his children to do the same thing. And then this approach was sort of reinvented. Through the Talmudic period, there were also great rabbis who took this approach. One of them, the Talmud says, was Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia lived 2,000 years ago. 2,000 years ago. At the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. There were Jews living in Israel, what is Israel today, in little scattered communities. They didn't have any transportation. And they didn't have communities. There's a few big communities. A community in those days was like a country. Of Athens and Sparta, were different nations. They're really just cities in the same country that we now call Greece. There was no Greece. What's the detergent that cuts the grease? What's it called? Florence and Venice are both cities in what we call now today the country of Italy, right? In 150 years ago, 200 years ago, they were nations fighting. There were wars between Greece, between Venice, which had a navy, and Florence, which had an army. I have a sister-in-law called Florence. Athens and Sparta fought wars. Troy was a city, wasn't a country. Who fought against Troy? Sparta. I think it was Sparta. Fought the Trojan War. The survivor of the Trojan War made his way to Italy and established Rome. They were cities, city-states. So this is where the idea where Tahalucha came from. So Rabbi Chia, in his time, lived 2,000 years ago, he saw there was a terrible ignorance amongst people living in these areas of Israel all over the place where they didn't have communities. They had groups of people, but didn't have organized communities, didn't have butcher shops. They didn't have, in many cases, didn't have shuls, didn't have schools. So what did he do? And this is very, very puzzling to people. It's described in the Talmud. Rebbe Chia became a farmer. He was a big scholar. Imagine the Rebbe becoming a farmer. Why would the Rebbe become a farmer? The Rebbe that we understand, our Rebbe, why would he become a farmer? People didn't understand it, plowing the ground. The Rebbe Chia, is this where you should be? You should be teaching in the yeshiva somewhere, in the big yeshivas. They had big yeshivas. Students who were able to would find their way to these yeshivas, and they became the great teachers of the history of the Mishnah and the Talmud. You should be teaching in the yeshiva. And he didn't understand, right? He just kept plowing and planting. What did he plant? Flax. What do we make out of flax? Flax is a very fibrous vegetable. It grows. It's very strong. It's unbreakable. That's why they put it in garments, because it holds the shape, right? Wool is the opposite. Wool is very soft. Can't mix wool and flax. Wool is easy to get. You just shear it off. Get rid of the wool. But flax is hard work. It's like making wine. It's a skill. It takes time and patience and hard work. It's very harsh on your skin, making flax. So we're not allowed to combine. They come from different sides, like kindness and severity. They're two opposites. We don't mix them. We don't mix milk and meat. We don't mix flax and wool. So he was planting flax. What did he do with the flax? People don't understand. What's he making? Why is he harvesting flax? And then what did he do? He worked it. He found out how you work flax, and he did it. He was working the flax and breaking it down into fibers and spinning the fibers into, what do you call it? Threads. Why is Rebbe Chia doing this? Nobody knew. Nobody could figure it out. And was taking time. It's very time consuming doing all these things. Then he took the threads and he wove them into ropes, into thick strands, and he made nets. What did he do with the nets? I guess, I don't know how he did it. Maybe he dug pits. He used the nets to catch wild animals, to catch deer. What did he do with the deer? He slaughtered the deer according to the laws of kashrus. And he took out the blood. He soaked them, salted them. He gave the meat to poor people. Then he took the skins of the deers and he treated them and made them into parchment. Whoa, this thing's so long. Rebbe Chia, what's going on with you? It's been a long time since you were in the yeshiva teaching. Why are you doing all this? Making parchment? Yeah, he made parchment. Then he took feathers and made them into pens, quill pens. And then he took berries and nuts, gall nuts, and made ink. And then he sat down with his quill pens and the ink and the parchment, and he wrote the whole Sefer Torah. 5 books, and then he set out on his journeys. And he went to the north where there were no schools and there were no shuls. And the children were running around in the streets in bare feet. It was, primitive. And he took children off the street, 5 children. He taught each one of them one of the 5 books of the Torah. And when they learned it perfectly well, then he told them all, now teach each other. When the Chachamim heard that was, so that's what you were doing all that time? The sages said, great, great, great beyond words is what Rebbe Chia accomplished. Because of Rebbe Chia, Torah will never be forgotten from Israel. Never. Because a person would say, I can't teach, I don't have any books. So make books. I can't make books. I don't have any pens. Go make your own pens. I can't write the Torah. I don't have any parchment. Go make parchment. I don't have any skins. Go get trap animals, make your own skins. He did every single step from scratch. And a person could argue and say, why? He could have been teaching all that time. Wouldn't it be more important to have been teaching? And in the end, they said no, because now it's impossible that anybody would allow Torah to be forgotten. Because even if he has nothing to help him, he has the example of Rabbi Chia to go back. And that's why they said 2,000 years ago, great is the accomplishment of Rabbi Chia. Because of him, Torah will never, ever be forgotten in Israel. And that's where the whole idea of Ta'alucha comes from. Ta'alucha means going out on a march, not a death march, but a life march, a Torah march, to teach Torah, to inspire people, that as a result of somebody coming into your shul on Yom Tov and telling a story about the exodus from Egypt, about the crossing of the sea, about the giving of the Torah, a person should be inspired to make sure that his children learn Torah and that he joins a Torah class and supports the yeshiva and so on and so on. That's the whole history of what Ta'alucha is. And the Rebbe just continued this tradition. It's an ancient tradition that comes from our fathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and comes from the way Jewish people, the leaders of the Jewish people lived, and even from the times of the Talmud 2,000 years ago, and from the time of the Baal Shem Tov, who got his students to do it, and the Alter Rebbe, and the Middler Rebbe, and the Rebbeim after them, who demanded that their students should behave in the same way. And our Rebbe has made this part of Yom Tov on the last day of Pesach. The last day of Pesach is connected with Moshiach. Why is it connected with Moshiach? Because it brings Moshiach. Because the first day of Yom Tov, first day of Pesach is the Yom Tov of who? Who's the great leader of the first day of Yom Tov? Moshe Rabbeinu. This is his Yom Tov, the Exodus from Egypt. Who is the great leader of the last day of Yom Tov? Moshiach. Because he is the leader who's going to bring about the ultimate Exodus, not just from Egypt, from the primeval Egypt, the source of all exiles. It's the Yom Tov, the ultimate redemption is the last day. And that's going to come through this kind of march, Torah march, when we have to all know that we are on the march. You know, and some people, they picked up on these ideas. You know, there's a great jazz musician, Louis Armstrong. You may not have heard of him. He blows a mean trumpet. And he was raised in poverty in a slum in the South. And there was a Jewish immigrant family that were his neighbors. And the children used to go out every day looking for things that people threw out that they might sell for a few coins every day. And they would take this little boy with them, their neighbor. And they taught him the importance of work and the importance of saving. And that's why this great jazz musician wears a Jewish star around his neck the whole time. Louis Armstrong. It's a very moving story. He grew up to be a world famous jazz musician. And one of the songs that he taught was, "When the Saints go marching in." I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. So all these great people who devoted their lives with self-sacrifice to helping other people, that's what's going to be when Mashiach comes. And that's going to come from the self-sacrifice of people who leave their comfort zone. The Yom Tov isn't just about eating matzahs and drinking wine and mashed potatoes and an endless ocean of bananas. It's going to bring in goodness and kindness into the world. Okay, Maria, welcome to our class. You're probably wondering, when are we going to start to learn Tanya? It says we're supposed to learn Tanya in this class, but I have to share with you this idea. Okay. If Esther Hannah were here, she would say, Rabbi, you have to say bracha achrena, bracha Torah, Al kel masha baras b'lacha yesh b'hem nefesh kol chai baruch chai ha'olamim. Okay, that is the teacher's version of what Taluch is all about. It's part of every yontif. We do it on the last day of Sukkot, we do it on the last day of Pesach, and we do it on the second day of Shavuot. And maybe the ladies can organize something for girls that they should also go to, maybe, senior homes, or to visit people. There are a lot of people in our community, they didn't have a Seder. It was organized by the Organization for Elderly People in Lubavitch, that Bachrim went to these different places and made a Seder for people who couldn't get out of their homes. Maybe the ladies could be arranged. I'll speak to somebody about it. Could be arranged. Ladies should be able to go in groups to visit people, can't get out of their homes, can't go to shul, can't go on taluch, and they should come and visit them and speak to them about the meaning of the yontif. Okay, thank you very much. Tomorrow, Mr. Shem, we're going to start learning Tanya again, chapter 13. We'll have to review chapter 12 because we zoomed through chapter 12. Finished before Pesach. Welcome back, everybody. So wonderful to see you all.
Hi, sorry. First question. You send someone to try or what? Okay, so it's to pay the nice like to pay and the other is for the last week. No, because in the end it's only 965 because it's a face to face. Not as good with before. Because with before I still pay with itself to do. Okay, yeah. So I can have it for last week.
I'm sorry.